Sophia Soto with the Nerds of Color. Such a pleasure to speak with both of you. Huge fan of both of your work.
Oh, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So first off, I want to ask, were there any challenges that came along with playing Henry and Claire that maybe you didn't experience with the past role and made it stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, multiple versions of ourselves was a great challenge and tricky. Also, the kind of out of sequence nature of not only the story but how we shot it was a challenge. You know, we got through it in the end, but you know, I've said this before, but you as you know, you cross shoot most TV these days, but then Stephen writes so in a great way, so out of sequence that it was complete, you know, head fuck in a way at times, because you'd be you know, Claire X age, Henry X age in episode X in year X, and then, you know, that afternoon you'd be in a different year, a different age, a different time, a different, it was discombobulating to say the least, but that's the great thing about, you know, the construction of it, and what Stephen did with the writing is that he uses time as a great narrative, which was kind of lovely.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Rose?
Well, I completely second that, knowing that that it was very discombobulating, trying to kind of keep a hold of where Claire was in her kind of scope and how she felt about Henry, because obviously she was not as enamored with him when he was 28. And so it was it was tricky, but it was also, you could kind of argue that the chaoticness lent itself to the scene, simply because it must be so phenomenally complicated inside her head as well, even though I believe that she kind of like begins to embrace it and come to terms with this is now her life. But certainly, yeah, there were days when it was tricky to be playing different ages.
Yeah, you actually both led me into my next question, because that, you know, for me as a viewer, I'm trying to put the puzzle pieces together and keep the timeline. So I'm curious, when you guys had scenes, did you think about the overall arc of the show and your characters, or were you really kind of just present in that scene in that moment to be like, okay, this is the age, this is the time, this is what's going on, this is all I can focus on?
I think simply just to kind of safeguard myself, because I begin to lose it when we do have kind of conversations about time and the jumping back and forth through it. So I realized that for my own sanity, and also to stay as focused as I could in that scene, I kind of honed into each day as its own entity, rather than trying to understand the timeline and get a bigger scope of it. And I don't know whether that was the right way of approaching her, but certainly it helped me in being able to give everything that I could on that day to the scene. But you're right, with hindsight, it probably would have been better to have understood where she was on her journey. But it was just so that I didn't get too confused.
I feel like I do the same approach. That's how I was watching. I feel like I do the same approach. So, and Theo, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand what Rose is saying. I think with Henry, I had to know where he had come from each time, and which version of events had happened in terms of him meeting Claire, because it was, you know, he meets her, what is it, 152 times or something, and I kind of needed to know vaguely how many times he'd met her and what had happened already, because it says in the script sometimes he's like, have we done this already? Did I meet you this time? You know, and he's kind of confused himself. But I kind of had to know where I was coming from and where I was going, so that I knew what would inform that scene, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to give you guys a fun question. If you could time travel to see one event or person in either the past or the future, what would you pick and why?
I see. I would see Hendrik perform live. I love Hendrix.
Perfect.
And, you know, that period, very cool.
Perfect answer. What about you, Rose?
Love that. I was just kind of thinking, what is it that I would love to see? And I think I'd kind of go to movies, and I think I'd love to have been on the set of Gone with the Wind. I think I would have just loved to have walked around as a little creep, just kind of earwigging and just getting a sense of what it was like to not only to shoot back then, but to be in the presence of those two actors.
I love that. And I want to also follow up with another fun question. Any of your past characters or roles, who do you think would make the best or the worst time traveler?
Make the best or the worst. I played this character, God, years ago. She was Scottish, of course. And she was kind of like a little country bumpkin. She grew up on one of the Outer Hebridean, Western Hebridean Islands of Scotland, and she just, yeah, I think that she would be completely thrown by time travel. Her name was Rian. Oh my God, her name was Rian, and I think she wouldn't be able to kind of handle it at all, because she was just very sweet and malleable, and I think that the being thrown through time would be very distressing for her. It's very distressing for Henry, but I think it would be distressing for her.
What about you, Theo?
Oh, tricky one. The worst time traveler would be one of my early jobs. It was a terrible TV show, and the guy in it was called Jed. So firstly, that's problematic because it's a terrible name. It was something about ghosts. He like texts ghosts or something. So anyway.
No, you told me about this, my love. It's called Bedlam.
Oh fuck yes. Yeah, he would be terrible because he's terrible.
That's all you need. That's the answer. And lastly, you both do such an amazing job bringing the love story to life on this series. So I wanted to ask you, what do you personally love about Claire and Henry's relationship?
I personally love the kind of stalwart nature of the two of them and their determinism, and both of them committing wholeheartedly to them working as best as they can.
I love that.
I would say they enjoy each other as a couple. They find each other funny. They enjoy each other's company. They fight, as all couples do, but beyond the time travel, I think the great thing about the story and the way it's written and from the book is that they're a great couple that you kind of want to hang around with, and you want to be with them. And I think that's great. That's unique.
Yeah. Rose, Theo, huge congrats on the series. I can't wait for everyone else to see, and it was such a pleasure speaking with both of you. Thank you for taking the time.
Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
The activists, directors, comments and the lectures, fanboys, professional artists and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV. Yeah, pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.